Hello survivors and welcome to another video. In this video we'll be discussing Sandy and Bruce, who are Decapitate and Disarm, and we're going to be comparing these two specialist skills. They are of course the Road Warrior event sort of like top rewards, and a lot of people are going to be hitting the 25 steering wheel mark at this point. Maybe not the 20,000 tires or 21,000 tires, but they're going to be getting there. You know whether you're going to be able to get one of these two characters. So first up, we're going to look at Sandy. So one of the big mistakes I'm seeing a lot of people make already is this: they're making the decision and they're saying, I'm going to claim Disarm Bruce because I've already got two Decapitate Tyrese. The thing is, you cannot compare Sandy as a Decapitate to Tyrese as a Decapitate. You should try to build anti-melee teams and anti-range teams. The only people who can just sort of build one pure team are people who have the latest promos, just because they're so overpowered. It really doesn't matter who they attack. Trait damage doesn't make any difference. All that stuff doesn't make any difference. It's basically just like getting the latest promos to make the game as easy as possible when you're raiding and as fast as possible. Whereas if you're trying to build, semi free to play teams and getting some lucky characters from promos or one of these decent event characters that pop up, you need to try and build teams that are specifically built to taking down specific defenses, just so it's faster. So comparing Sandy and Tyrese is very wrong, because they'd effectively be on two different teams. Tyrese would sit next to an Andrea, perhaps, on an anti-range team, destroying Ericas, destroying some tough characters on those defense teams as well, if he's geared correctly within his combat mods to do bonus damage to tough characters. Whereas Sandy would be on the completely opposite team. She'd be on anti-melee team. She would be taking out strong characters, absolutely destroying them, maybe doing extra damage to fast characters if she had the combat mods, 35-45% extra damage to fast characters. So you cannot compare those two characters, so you should not make the decision based on the fact that you have Tyrese. You can compare Sandy with Alpha, but it's pretty obvious that Sandy is a much better single target, particularly Decapitate. And Sandy can take out two people because the way her rush works. She can hit a double attack on the first character and kill them and decapitate them, and then the second part of her rush, which would be the second attack, would go to another character. It works the same way as basically every character that does the deal 2 attacks of. Now the biggest bonus as well of Sandy is if you're coming up against strong teams, there's nothing to block her rush. She AP down and stun on attack will not stop her rush halfway through, and even absolute defense fast characters will not stop her rush, but it will block the damage. Whereas if you try and use her against range teams and you try and, for instance, rush someone who is an alert character, she can get stunned halfway through her rush. I know this very well because I used Dwight for a long time and that used to happen quite often. So that's the first thing. Compare Sandy purely to Alpha, not Tyrese, and obviously Sandy does come out on top. If you already deal with melee teams really well, then that's great. Alpha does require a lot more to be a better character, whereas Sandy is kind of like a lone wolf. She could maybe use a little bit of buffing and survivability, but she is so strong as an individual, whereas Alpha does need a character specifically there to buff her, maybe a character specifically there to do defense down. She needs a specifically good attacking leader, which there aren't very many of within melee attack teams at the moment. So it can be much harder to make Alpha a good character, where it's much easier to make Sandy a good character. And also you've got to realize that Sandy is the only alert Decapitate. There's no one directly comparable to her. Whereas if we go across to Bruce, who was released quite a long time ago, compared to Sandy, he has 100% comparable characters, because the thing about Disarm characters is it really doesn't matter about their traits so much, in that you can make them massively defensive. Decapitates, they are a direct counter, whereas Disarms can just tank them out within their mods, their own weapon, and just you can use them on range teams, you can use them on melee teams, you can have them in both. The thing there is, if you weren't to pick up Bruce and you did pick up Sandy, any other Disarm you ever get in the future, whether you get lucky on an RNG like anniversary style wheel, whether you get lucky in like a one pull on a promo wheel, that Disarm is going to be just as useful as Bruce. There are obviously some other Disarms that are better. I think the best Disarm is probably Harper, just because her rush is so powerful with the defense down. But every single other Disarm is comparable to Bruce in terms of you want to massively gear them towards utilizing their Disarm and use other characters to actually have the damage outlay. You don't need to do damage with Bruce. If anything, doing damage to Bruce can sometimes be counterproductive, because if he kills somebody, they're not decapitated, and that's kind of what you want to do, especially at a sort of higher level right now. So that's what you've got to do. You've got to weigh up the risk in terms of ever being able to get Sandy again, and never ever being able to get a disarm again. You're more likely to pull a disarm in the future than you are to pull an individual character in Sandy. Sandy as an individual is one of the strongest characters in the game. She is very, very good. I'd say within the Decapitate, she's got the best single target damage. I think the only comparable character is maybe Wayland, but she does do more damage. She can potentially do so much more because of her weapon. It is a boosted double attack weapon. It isn't like the 150% one you get in the museum. And I think if you directly compare the two characters, you're more likely to be able to get disarm in the future than her. That's why I'm picking her up on both of my regions. I do have Bruce on one of my regions, fortunately, but even if I didn't, I 100%, and this is after using Bruce for a while it is really, really, really useful, you can bypass a lot of what Bruce does with focus. Whereas Decapitate, there's nothing else that really replaces Decapitate. Heal reduction is just not good enough, and Decapitate is so important, especially against these tanky melee teams at the moment, because Alpha just really doesn't cut it. Not everybody's going to be able to get the 20,000 tires, but I think most people will be able to get the 25 steering wheels. Obviously, if you don't get 20,000 and you get only, I think it's 10 to 11,000, you can claim either Beta or you can claim Sophia. In terms of which character I think's better out of these two, Beta is directly a raid character, not much else. All he is about is raids. He isn't anything like world map. It's all about AP control, which is 100% geared towards raiding. I've come up against him on defense teams a few times, and I barely even notice he's there. When he has rushed, it hasn't really done huge amounts of damage. I think, if anything, he must be a bit more of an attack team character, but I'm not really a big fan of fast characters on attack teams unless you have a really specific fast team build. And I'm not really sure if this guy is the one that would sort of fit in on those teams. He doesn't give any buffs with his rush. He hasn't got a super fast rush either. And I think the majority of the early turn rush teams within fast characters have 66 AP rushes. And there are a bunch of those at the moment. Now, if you compare him to Sofia, Sofia is usable in a lot of parts of the game. Because of that defense down, she's going to make tanky stages in future roadmaps, in faction assault, going to be much easier to sort of take down. Obviously, the biggest issue there is resists within faction assault anyway. She has got a specialist skill which is much rarer, although neutralize is a very good specialist skill, but like I said, it's mainly geared towards raids. The confusing AP gain is nice because you can bypass a shield, but it does have an initial cooldown of 3, which is not fantastic. Her combination with someone like Tyrese would be really good because of the defense down. Tyrese is going to almost definitely decapitate someone against a ranged team. And her rush is actually pretty fast. 66 AP is pretty good, but it doesn't really make too much of a difference on attack teams at the moment. And with 66 AP, she will get a second turn command rush, but you probably wouldn't want to use it because her defense down only lasts for 1 turn. You want to use her rush on a turn when you're going to have rushes, other rushes ready, like Tyrese, like Andreas, if you're going to use Andrea as a leader. You want to use these characters in conjunction with each other. So that's the main characters. Decap versus Disarm. I'd say Decap is the better one to go for as an individual character, whereas Disarm is better to go for if you want to boost both your anti-melee and anti-ranged offenses. Sandy is specifically there to destroy melee teams. That's it. Whereas Bruce can be used against ranged and he can be used against melee, but he's the easiest one to get in the future again, like I said, because if you get this guy, if you get Lewis, it's exactly the same situation. You can get him defensively and he can come up against ranged and he can come up against melee in that situation. Whereas the likeliness of getting Sandy in the future is much, much lower just because it's an individual character. And she isn't really been in too many of these like anniversary wheels and stuff. Not that Bruce has either, but there have been disarms in there. Now, if you're going to go for Beta and Sophia, I would say, again, Sophia is probably the better one to go for, but go for whoever you feel is the best character for you and will make the difference for your team. Always go with that sort of feeling, but try and weigh things up as much as possible as well. So that's the end of my video. Do tell me how you're doing in the event. How many steering wheels have you got? How many tires? Are you going to be close? Do you think you're going to have to be buying some bags to be able to get enough tires at the end of the event? I might have to myself. I'm about halfway and we're about halfway on the event, so it's going to be close. We'll see. But that's the end of my video. Thank you very much for tuning in, and as always, keep on surviving, guys. Keep on surviving.